Okay, first thing I'm going to do is to place 150 grams of flour into my large bowl. So I'm just going to measure that out if I need to first. So I'm going to put a small bowl on the scales, turn it on, and I want it to read 0 and grams. It says millilitres at the moment, so I'm just going to press the unit button until it says grams, make sure it's on 0, and then measure my flour into there. This has already been weighed for me, so it should be okay. Plus or minus a few grams is absolutely fine. It's 146. I expect there's still a bit more in the bag. There we go, 148, perfect. And I'm going to pop that into my bowl. Next thing I'm going to do is to measure in my butter. And that's 50 grams of butter that I'm going to use. I'm going to pop that, just check the weight. 50 grams, and then place it into my large bowl with the flour. Now what I'm aiming to do is to rub all of this in. So I'm going to break it up into smaller pieces. You could use a table knife to cut it up for you if you want to. And then just using my fingertips. It's similar to when we made the scones. If you remember back to when we did that. I'm just going to use the tips of my fingers just to rub all of that butter into the flour to coat it. It's going to take a little while. And if you're thinking to yourself, Miss, how do I know when this is all done? Give the bowl a shake and any lumps that are still in there will rise to the top. I can feel I've still got lumps, but in a minute they'll be gone. And we want this to resemble breadcrumbs. Okay, so I'm just going to check if my crumble topping's ready. Give the bowl a shake, and I can see that there are a few little lumps of butter just coming to the top there. So I'm just going to rub those last couple of pieces out, and then I'm going to add in my sugar and my oats. Oats are optional. If you do want to put them in, they add a little bit of texture. That's 25 grams going in there. And then you should have brought in 2 lots of sugar. One of 50 grams, one of 25. The 50 grams is going to go into the bowl. Just give all of those a stir together. That's your crumble topping. I'm just going to pop that to one side now whilst we prepare the apples. But the reason why we're going to do the apples second is because they do go brown when you start to peel them. The process of enzymic browning is going to happen as soon as there's a cut edge. So we make the crumble topping first, we pop it to one side, and then we do this next. Now hopefully you've got some fruit which has originated in the UK. This one has. I can see it's a Bramley apple. It's a cooking apple, and it has come from the United Kingdom. So it's got a Union Jack on there. Now, these apples have got incredibly thick, waxy skins. So we want to make sure that we remove that skin, and we're going to do that using a peeler. So take hold of your apple, and you could try and go all the way around, spiral round, and try and remove all the skin. You don't need to do it in a particularly pretty way. You can do it however you like. You'll notice that you've got some bruises and bits in there. You can peel over the same place a couple of times to get rid of those bruises. If they're a bit larger, you can use the knife. And we're aiming just to really carefully, without getting the blade of the peeler close to our skin, remove all of the waxy skin from 2 of your apples. If your apples are a bit smaller than this, you can use more than 2. If your dish is particularly large, you may need to do more again. So adapt the amount of fruit that you are using to the size of the dish. So I've removed all of the skin. I've just got a waste pile to the side, and I need to now remove the core. So the core runs from the top to the bottom of the apple. Using a bridge hold, I'm going to cut all the way through the middle of the apple. Here's the core on the inside. We don't want that. So holding it in a bridge again, I'm going to cut through the middle of the core to remove that. So it's on the edge so I can easily remove it. And then cutting each of these pieces in half again. You'll notice I'm using a bridge. Turn each piece onto the side, and then we're removing the edge of these pieces. You'll notice all of the core is on the edge, so if we cut the edge off, we're removing all of the core, and that all goes over to our waste side. So we want the good bits of apple to one side and the waste that we don't want to use on the other. Try not to get all of those bits mixed up together. So I've got them all cut up into chunks. You could put them into slices if you wanted to, like this. I quite like to just dice them. You can do it quite chunky like I am, or you can cut them a little bit smaller. Depends how chunky you want your fruit to be. You want them to all be roughly the same size, and notice I'm using a claw hold now, keeping my fingers behind the knife, to chop all of the pieces up. So what we're going to do is to transfer this now into our saucepan. We're going to put a tiny bit of water in with our fruit. We're going to work quite quickly because the cut edge of the apple is now exposed to the air, and there's oxygen in the air, so the enzymes that's in the fruit is going to mix with the oxygen in the air and cause this to go brown. We call it enzymic browning. So I'm going to take a tiny drop of water, about a tablespoon. I'm going to choose an appropriate size ring, and I'm going to put that onto a medium heat. I'm going to say about a 4. This is where your smaller amount of sugar gets placed into the pan. This is 25 grams and is plenty for the amount of fruit that we have got. You'll also want to add plenty of sugar if you're using something really sour like rhubarb, but less if you're using summer berries. This would also be the time to add any spices. Look how much water I've got. It is literally just covering the bottom of the pan there. Okay, so it's not swimming in it. I'm going to give that a stir with my wooden spoon and just cook that until the fruit has started to soften. If you are using any summer berries, so for example, apple and blackberry, cook this until it's softened. The blackberries just go in for 30 seconds to a minute at the end. Rhubarb, plums, anything hard like that will take a similar amount of time as the apples, so you could add them in at the same time if you're doing, for example, apple and rhubarb. Okay, you can see that the fruit is still quite firm, so I'm going to give that another few minutes until it starts to soften. I quite like mine quite chunky, but if you like yours more of a puree, you would cook it until you achieve that consistency. Again, making sure there's not too much or too little water. If there's too much water, it's going to be really wet and sloppy. And if there's too little water, the apple might stick and burn onto the bottom of the pan. Okay, so I'm happy that my fruit has softened somewhat. You'll notice it really shrinks down quite a lot when it cooks, and lots of moisture comes out of the fruit as well. So I'm going to pop all of that off, and then we're going to layer it up in our oven-proof dish. So this will need to be baked in the oven, but it doesn't have to be baked in the oven in school time. You could bake it when you get home. It depends how much time you've got. So I'm going to level it out with my spoon. There we go, approximately. And then we're going to go on with the topping. And you could do that spoon by spoon, or you could tip it in a little bit more roughly. Now, depending on the size of your tin, will depend how much of this crumble topping you need. It will also depend on how much fruit you use. So have a look at the dish that you've got. That should determine how much you need to add of each layer. And if you just give it a bit of a shake and a tap, that will just level it off for you. Now, you've got an option. You can either just put the lid on, put it in the blast chiller, take it home and bake it then, or if you've got time in class, you can pop it into the oven and let it cook. We're looking for the top to just be golden brown and for it to be heated back all the way through. If you do